And I just want to say before we begin, huge thanks to TA and Christopher for hosting us and supporting us in this webinar. And thank you to our captioners and our translators and interpreters that are on the calls with us. We really appreciate that. My name is Alexa Plotkin, and I'm here with my colleagues Devin, Grayson Wallace, and Andrew Mondak to present today. Before we get started on the meat of the presentation, I just want to let everyone know a few things about the webinar today and how we'll take questions and how we'll provide resources. So in the chat, the normal sort of webinar chat that you should see on the side of your screen is where we will be posting links or different resources, information like our email addresses or phone numbers and stuff like that. And you will see at the bottom of your screen like a Q&A icon, and that's the chat pod that if you do have a question that you want to ask to just the host, just the presenters directly, you can do that, and we are able to type back a response to you and sort of engage in a question and answer that way. And if we do have a question that comes up that you send to us individually, we may raise it to the rest of the group if it's relevant to the larger group. And I just want to make a note that this is the Calculating FTEs webinar specifically for discretionary program grantees, which is different from the formula program, both STOP and SASP. And the major difference here is that the formula programs report over a period of a year, and our discretionary grantees report every 6 months. So the reporting period is shorter, and therefore calculating FTEs is different. So if you are a formula grantee, you're certainly welcome to stay on this call, and our information is relevant to you to an extent. But this is specifically for our discretionary 6-month reporting period grantees. Andrew, if you don't mind, hitting to the next slide. So who we are, if you're not sure, VAWA MEI, that's Violence Against Women Act, Measuring Effectiveness Initiative. We like to say we're your partners in performance reporting. And so we ourselves are OVW Technical Assistance Program grantees, and we are awarded funds to support both OVW and grantees with data reporting. And that means we generally, for grantees, provide training and technical assistance. An example of that would be a webinar presentation like today that we're doing. We offer individual one-on-one assistance over email, phone. We do Zoom calls. We have resources on our website, and we're just here to provide support in how to report. And we also collect and analyze all of the data that gets reported to OVW, and we report out on that. So you may see things like a report to Congress go by, and that was put together by our organization using all of the data that you all report on these reporting forms. And so that's really what we do. Next slide, please. So in today's webinar, we will go over how to calculate what we call on the forms a full-time equivalent staff person, and we use the acronym FTE. And we will go over how you calculate that. We will do some practice calculations. We will review a resource that is available to you that we call the FTE Calculator, which is a really cool tool that we can provide to y'all that helps automatically calculate FTEs if you input a little bit of data. And that's something that you can download from our website and use every reporting period. And we will also review all of the available resources and where to ask for help, not just for staff FTEs, but for all of the performance reporting needs. So at the end of the presentation, you'll have all that contact information. And I would just like to say that the webinar that we are in today will be recorded and posted to our website, as will the training materials that we have today. So this PowerPoint that contains all of the resources and information will be available on our website. And it is not the only opportunity for you to access these resources in the webinar today. They're always available to you, and you can email us directly and we can link you to them, or you can find them yourselves on our website. So this is not the only time you'll be seeing this information. So don't feel like you have to take it all down or all in at this moment. So most of the forms that we're talking about today are set up the same, but I just want to make a note that there are a few programs that have staff totals on their forms as opposed to individual staff categories. So if you hear me say something like report by function in the specific category and your form doesn't have that, that's okay. Some forms have it, most forms actually have it, and some forms don't. So you'll just have to check your individual form to see what your staff section looks like on the form. And so to begin, OVW asks that you report the staff on the reporting form that is funded by the grant. So you may have people at your agency that are funded with multiple streams, and work all kinds of different hours, this, that, and the other thing. But we're basically looking for only people whose FTE, so full-time equivalent salary, is provided fully, partially by the OVW funds for the program form you are reporting under. And we also ask that you report contracted time. So anybody who's working outside of your agency, if they were supported with the funds, OEW wants to see that staff FTE time on the reporting form. And so they're also then asking you to report by activity rather than job title. And again, if you only have staff total on your form, this does not apply. But if you have the categories on your form, then you will be required to report by activity. So if someone, for example, has the title of, let's say, program coordinator, but they also provide training at your agency, and it's under the same grant funding, you would want to make sure you capture their staff FTE time as both of those roles and not just the one. So we want to see both like program coordinator and a trainer reported on your form. The form is also asking you to report to 2 decimals, the second decimal. So you can report 1.00 FTEs on the form. You can report 0.67, 0.54. It's always going to be 2 decimal points, and you can just round up if you have a decimal that goes out, and just use the regular rules of rounding to round up or round down and report to that second decimal point. Another thing that we encourage you all to do is to prorate time if necessary. And prorating is important because not all, oh, getting glare from my window. I apologize, everyone. Oh no, the sun is setting on me. I apologize. So prorating is necessary when somebody has not worked full-time during the reporting period. And this is important because OVW aggregates all of the reported staff time for a program. And to give you an example of this, if you have someone who works at an agency and it's one person and they worked full-time during the reporting period, you can report them on the form as 1 FTE. And if you have another person at a different agency under the same grant program who worked full-time but only worked 3 months in the reporting period, their staff FTE is going to be a 0.5 FTE because they only worked half of the reporting period. And then the final tip we say is to use the other category sparingly on the form. We have an other category if the specific category on the form for the position you're trying to report is not listed, there is an other category on the form. And if you use that, we ask that you provide good detail in the other category. So instead of writing something like consultant and then reporting like a 0.5 FTE, we would ask that you report something like information technology specialist 0.5 FTE. And if you have to report multiple people in the other category, you're going to end up reporting them as a total because there's only one other line on the form. So if you have to report 2 different staff functions in the other box, we would ask that you write like information technology specialist and in parentheses, assign them the amount of FTE. So if they're like a 0.2 FTE, and then next to them, you might write the next person. For example, it could be educator. That is a category in the form, but let's just say for the other purposes, you would then say educator, 0.5 FTEs. So your total for the other box would be 0.7 FTEs, but we would know, and OVW would know in looking at your data what the grant was funding. So we just ask that you be as specific as you can be when you report in those other categories. Okay. Okay, and I see we have a question in the webinar chat, and I will address that, or Devin or Andrew can address that and type an answer. But if not, I'll answer that after we go over this one specific slide. Okay, so the exciting part of the presentation is how do we calculate FTEs? And we provide this slide for everyone as a reference. There's a lot of numbers on it, and hopefully I will be able to go over them, and then you will be able to use this and refer back to this slide when you're calculating the FTEs for your performance report. So the FTE calculations are based on a 40-hour work week. And I will go over how you can base your calculations if your agency uses a work week other than 40 hours. So the calculations are based on a 40-hour work week, and the period is 26 weeks. So that is a 6-month period. There's 52 weeks in a year. And if we're doing half the period, which is 6 months, that's 26 weeks. And then within a 40-hour a week for 26 weeks, working period, you can possibly work 1,040 hours in a 6-month period. So that's all the numbers that you're seeing on the screen. And the way that we calculate FTEs, or the way we like to let people know how to calculate FTEs, this is not the only way, but it's the way we like to present it, is that you're going to do a calculation for the amount of possible hours that somebody could have worked in a reporting period over the total amount of hours that could have been worked. So if we take it to that first row on this slide where we get 1.00 FTE, somebody worked 40 hours for 26 weeks, and that means they worked 1,040 hours, and 1,040 hours divided by 1,040 hours gets you 1.0 FTE. And so if we follow that logic and go down to the next row, somebody who works 20 hours a week, so that's half time, is 520 hours out of a possible 1,040 hours, and that gets us a 0.5 FTE. And so you would do that on down the line. 16 hours a week gets you 416. 416 over 1,040, 0.4 FTEs. And so you can basically do that for any person that you have working that you want to calculate their hours. You can add up how many hours they worked in the reporting period and divide that by the total amount of hours worked. And again, this is not the only way you can do it. You can also take a percentage of someone's time if they worked full time. If somebody worked full time and they only worked 2 months, but it was full time, you can do 2 divided by 6, because essentially it's always going to be the amount of hours somebody worked over the total amount of hours. And whether you're doing that in hours or months or weeks, the math works out. So it's really up to your agency how you all want to keep track and calculate FTEs. But we just like to say, be consistent in the way that you are counting and calculating FTEs so that your calculations are usually always coming out the same.
So now I'm going to take you guys through some examples. Before we do, there is a question in the Q&A that I think we can answer live real quick. Somebody is asking, Karen is asking, how about if someone worked 40 hours a week but did not get hired on until December? You can use that same calculation where, okay, they didn't get hired until December, but how many hours did they work before the end of the year? So if they got hired the last week and they only did 40 hours for this reporting period till the end of the year, you have your 40 to divide by that 1,040 hours for the entire period. So you would have a nice small FTE for that one person. If they worked the entire month of December or an even number of weeks, you can do that. I worked 5 weeks or 4 weeks divided by the 26 weeks and get that same number as well. So depending on how you want to count how much time they worked in that reporting period, you can make your calculations and it'll all come out the same in the end. So with that, we'll show some examples, real life examples. So say you're a university and you received an OVW program grant for a full-time counselor whose salary is only 75% funded by this grant. And they've got another full-time counselor, but their salary is only 15% funded by the grant. We want to know what FTE should this grant report for these counselors. I'll give everybody a count of 5 to figure out what they think the answer is. I see some answers coming in the chat. All right. So one more second. People like A. All right. All right. So you are correct. It is A. So in this case, we've got 2 people that worked a percentage of the time. And so you can take that exact percentage and use it like a decimal. And so 75% of the time is 75 over or under over 100. So you get 0.75. And then you've got your 15%, which is 15 over 100. You've got your 0.15. And then when you add those together, you've got your 0.90 FTE. So unless you've got a full 1,040 hours or a full 100% funded for the entire time, you're not going to have a number 1 or larger. So because we've got 2 people, they're still working less than 100% of one person being on 100% for the whole thing. All right, example 2. Your organization's OVW program grant was used to fund a part-time trainer who spends 6 hours per week providing trainings and 4 hours per week completing support staff tasks around the office. Take note that we've got 2 different kind of work classifications here. What FTE would you report for these 2 people or for these 2 tasks on this one person? Once again, we'll pause, see what people want to guess. We've got A. We got a C. We got another A. A couple of C's. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, so this one might be a little tricky because it's hours per week. So it kind of translates to a much smaller number than people might expect. So in this case, you're going to split the grant funded trainer by their function. And so the trainer educator who's working 6 hours per week, you're going to do that 6 hours per how much per week. That gives you the 0.15, 6 divided by 40. And then they're going to also be working as a support staff to include 4 hours over 40 hours a week, which gives you that 0.10. Added together, that's 0.25. This is just another one of those notes. If you have it stipulated in your reporting form and your grant, you're going to separate the actions, even though it might be one person, you're going to separate their actions out amongst their activities for your report. Certain grants, like the TA grant, will just have a total for each person, And then that all goes into one total so that the grant knows one FTE number for the grant versus others who might need separate FTEs by the activity. Example number 3, your organization used its OVW program grant to fund a full-time counseling position. The counselor was hired 2 months into the reporting period. What FTE would you report for this person? In A. Don't be shy and guessing. There's no wrong answer because every answer helps you learn. We got a B, another A. I will say this is also similar to the question we answered live a little bit earlier, right before the examples, of that person who didn't start working until December. Here we go. A B, a couple other A's. All right. So in this case, the answer is B. You're gonna, like we said earlier, you're gonna prorate this FTE for this person if you're gonna count it by months. And so 4 months over 6 months of the period. So you've got 4 divided by 6, that gives you the 0.67. So this is also, remember, the report by the job function, not by the title of the person. And so this person did just kind of the one job function. They're not necessarily going to be listed under their job title if they are called a director or a financial, operator. If they're doing counselor work, you're going to be putting them under your FTE as counselor at that 0.67, even though their job title might be something different. All right, example number 4. Your OVW program grant paid a translator 65 hours of work. What FTE would you report for this translator? I see an A, C, a couple more C's coming in. Another A, C, C looks like it's popular. All right, 3, 2, 1. C is correct. So we were lucky with this one because yes, they're a translator, they're kind of like a consultant or a subcontractor. We know how many hours they worked. And so we can take that hours over the entire possible hours for the period, do that quick little fraction math, and come out with the 0.06 FTE for a translator line item of activity. For other consultants and contractors who you might receive an invoice or a bill from them, you don't necessarily know like their hours that they worked for the period. You can still calculate kind of an equivalent FTE if you know their kind of like wages per hour or their cost per hour that they charge you. At that point, say you've got a bill for $1,000 and you know they're charging $100 an hour, you can divide that $1,000 by the $100 per hour and get an estimated man hours, which you can use to calculate your FTE. And of course, if this all ever seems kind of finicky and confusing, we're here for you. So just contact us and we can figure out any special circumstances, any additional examples you might have for us. We can still work them out for you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew, for all those examples. And I just want to take a moment to mention that so far we've been calculating based on a 40-hour work week, which gets us those 1,040 hours in the period. But if your agency has, let's say, for example, a 35-hour work week, then 35 hours over 26 weeks is going to give you 910 hours. So you would take all the calculations that we have provided for you and substitute that 1,040 hours for 910. And so this would follow if your agency had a 32-hour work week, 32 over 26 weeks, that's 832 hours total. So whatever your agency has for a work week, that's what your calculation should be based on. And so someone asked a question actually right here in the chat. If an agency has a 40-hour work week but pays for 2.5 hours of lunch each day, so the work hours are 37.5. If the grant funds are covering the 2.5 hours of lunch, then that should be counted on the reporting form as an FTE for 40 hours a week. So the form is really asking to follow the funds. So anything that the funds support, you're going to want to report on the form. I hope that is clear. And again, if anybody has any clarifying questions specifically about what's going on at your agency, feel free to reach out to us via email and ask a question. We're happy to talk to you about what's going on at your agency and discuss any sort of complications or complexities that you have in your staff reporting. Okay, so this is a slide that we like to present, or it's 2 slides that kind of highlight some common staff reporting discrepancies that we see on our end at Val MEI when we're looking over data that's been reported on the forms. And so stuff that flags for us is high numbers of FTEs reported in a single category. So if you're calculating FTEs and you come up with a number and even a number as low as 5, but on the reporting forms, like that's a high number. So if you find yourself reporting a number and it's over perhaps 2 or 3, you may be calculating staff incorrectly. So just kind of look out for that when you're reporting in the staff section. We do see forms with typos. So someone may accidentally report 100 victim advocates. That's a common one. We will fix those errors for you on our part, but just look out when you're reporting for those high numbers. And something that we've emphasized throughout this presentation, but we'll emphasize again here, is prorating. So we'll notice on the forms when a grantee is not prorating not prorating by job function, because they will have reported perhaps in a section like training, but then they will not have reported the equivalent staff. So their staff section may only have, let's say, the program coordinator, because they spend maybe most of their time as a program coordinator at their agency, but they're also the trainer. And so if we see that you've reported in a section like training or education, we would look back at your staff section and see if you have that corresponding FTE supported with grant funds to support those activities. So just kind of try to follow that logic when you're reporting. If you're reporting in a section that should have the staff, make sure you kind of have that connection between the section you're reporting in and the staff section. And then another one that is connected to prorating is that FTEs have not been prorated by a hire date or a start date. Sometimes, a grant won't have a budget approved, so you didn't start using funds until partway through the period, and you may write that in your narrative. And when we look at your form, we will read that, but then we look at the staff section and it looks like you have reported 1.0 FTEs. So you're reporting full-time staff, but you actually didn't work. Those staff members didn't work the entire reporting period. So you're going to want to make sure you're paying attention to the proration of staff time for the amount of time worked during the reporting period. Okay, so we just gave a ton of information to you, and I hope it was not too confusing. But to support you in this journey of calculating staff FTEs, we are providing you with some resources that are on our website. We have a frequently asked questions document that will hopefully highlight some of the more common questions that we get as TA providers of grantees asking us to clarify certain things. We do actually have an e-learning video that goes through what's an FTE, and again, will just be sort of a different learning style for how to calculate FTEs. So if you want to take a look at that, it could be helpful. And we also have the FTE calculator. And we are actually going to demo that on the call right now, but that link is for you all to get to the calculator so that you can download it and use it yourself. And so with that, Devin, do you think someone just asked for the links into the chat when you get a chance, if you don't mind? We should be able to do
Yes,
that. Great, thank you.
definitely.
So we will also, let's see, well, yep, here we go. So this is Andrew sharing his screen right now to the FTE calculator, which is an Excel spreadsheet that we created here at Val MEI as a tool for grantees to automatically calculate FTEs. And if you go to our website, you have the option to download the file and you can save it to your desktop. And every reporting period, you can download and save a fresh copy of the FTE calculator and open it up, and it takes you through all of the questions that might come up and all the data needed to figure out how to report an FTE. And so we have, I just want to say it's an Excel file that if the view on your screen, and we have a note of this at the top, it says computer display sizes and setting vary. So we tried to set it up so that when you open it, you would see the whole calculator, steps 1 through 9, and you would follow those boxes and enter the data as you read the directions. So it's helpful to open the calculator and adjust the zoom settings on Excel to make sure you can see that whole calculator. And the zoom settings in Excel, Andrew, if you can point out with your mouse, yep, right at the bottom there, you can adjust the zoom of your Excel sheet so that you can see the entire calculator. And so we begin with step 1. And step 1 says select your grant program from the drop-down list below. And then it says click in this box and look for the arrow. Click the arrow and select a program. So Andrew, you get to select a program today.
I think today we're going to do an underserved grant.
All right, all the way at the end. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so now that we've selected a program, if you look all the way to the right, the staff list, it says the name of the program above it, underserved, and it gives us the staff list for the underserved program. So we'll pre-populate that staff list. And then Andrew, if you can toggle back, yep. Step 2 is enter the total available hours in your program's work week. So we defaulted the calculator to the 40-hour work week, but if your agency has a different amount of hours, you would just click into that box and type in the amount of hours for your work week, 32, 35, 37, whatever it is. And that will automatically adjust the calculator to your work week. And so then you get into entering the data for the folks who are working at your agency who are funded by the grant. So it says enter the name of the staff member whose time was supported by the OVW grant funds in the table below. And so Andrew has entered our first staff person, and that's Allison, and then he's entered Andrew as the second one. And step 4 asks you to enter the number of months during the 6-month reporting period that the staff member's position was paid with OVW grant funds. And so this is where you can get at like, oh, someone was hired partway through, no problem. And I will say the entries don't have to be the same for each person. So Allison worked all 6 months, but Andrew can be reported in as 3.5. And so, if you have an amount of weeks that somebody worked and you need to kind of like say it's, 4.5 months or something like that, I think it's fair to just kind of like round that off in the calculator. And then you can move on to step 5, and this is going to be the drop down box for the staff functions. So Allison is a support staff, and she is also a counselor. Okay. Step 6 is use the drop down list to select the method you would use to report time. And so we have 3 options in the calculator here: hours worked per week, total hours worked in the period, and percent of time entered as a whole number. So let's do hours worked per week. So let's say Allison worked, a certain number of hours as a sports staff and counselor. And this is where the calculator could get a little tricky. If she worked the same amount of hours per week as both a support staff and a counselor, then you can use the same row and the drop down to do multiple functions for one person. But if she did work a different number, does it work that way?
Yes.
Oh, great. I made this thing years ago and I didn't remember that it worked that way. Good on me for setting it up that way. So you can actually type in the amount that's different for each row in step 7. Oh, good. And so Allison is a support staff who worked 30 hours per week, and she's a counselor who worked 10 hours per week. And now if we go over to our total and look down, we can see that she's been entered as a 0.25 counselor and as a 0.75 support staff. And so you can slide back and select your options for Andrew and fill out the categories for everyone in your agency who's supported with grant funds. And let's say that Andrew, the way we calculated, he was total hours worked in the period. So he was a trainer and he did 500 hours of training for us in this period. And then we go and look, and trainer populated 0.48. And then if we go all the way down to the bottom and we can see that's total, we have 1.48. And the forms on the impact tool, when you enter the data, they will auto total for you. So you don't have to carry over the total. But what you would do is if you're using FTE Calculator, you would just take the data you entered and look at the totals in this table and then take that from the table into the impact tool and report. And so if you want to go backwards at any point while you're using the calculator, we ask that you take the data out of all the steps that are filled out ahead of where you want to go back to. So if you wanted to change the program, clear all the data and then go and pick another program. The calculator will actually limit your ability to select a different program if you haven't cleared the data out of, I think it's steps 3 through 7. So you have to take it all the way back and start over. And if you're ever worried that you've somehow clicked something incorrectly in the calculator or you're like, it's not working, we just say close it, download a fresh copy, and start over again. It's an Excel workbook. It has formulas, and they're hidden on sheets in the background of the workbook. So it could be that somehow the formulas get corrupted and it's not working anymore. Or maybe there's a glitch in it. Anytime, and I would just say if anyone notices anything like that, that's not working in any of our resources, we'd love it if you reached out to us to let us know, because it could be that we went in to make some sort of edit based on different sort of updates to the forms. And then somehow we made a mistake and posted a new resource that had an error. So we'd love it, if you came across stuff like that, if you'd let us know. But generally, with this, if it's erroring and it's not calculating correctly, yeah, starting over with a fresh copy is helpful. And every reporting period, just download a new copy and start from scratch. Okay, and that's the FTE Calculator.
I believe this is me. So right here at the end, who do we call for help? As we said in the beginning, I think we said in the beginning, we are not OVW and we are not just grants. We are a separate grant funded TA provider who is also an OVW grantee, just like the rest of you. So if you have a question or need technical support from Just Grants or anything with your Just Grants account, they have their own support staff and kind of support website pages for you to read through that will hopefully help you with any issue you have through your Just Grants portal. Unfortunately, we have no access to Just Grants. So if you have any questions about it, we can't even see the information that you might be looking for, even if we wanted to answer your question. We're just completely out of the loop. We apologize. All right. If it's something to do more with your program, like if you need to verify the grant supported activities that you're doing, if you need to get approval for products or curriculums for trainings, or if you have any trouble, you can't submit your report by the deadline, your grant specialist at OVW is your main contact. The OVW office kind of, they are the overreaching deciders on how they want the grant funds to be spent. So they're the ones you want to reach out to for any kind of stipulations on how to use your grant and grant funds, or if you're going to have any issue with performing, your grant activities. And 3, if you have any questions on your reporting form or performance reporting, and now on the impact tool, we are your technical assistance grantee here to support you on those. That is our mission, to make sure that your reporting is easy and clear and hopefully less of a burden than it was in the past. We're available by email, by phone. We can Zoom at lots of times. So anywhere you need help with your performance reporting, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I guess lastly, any questions? Any more questions?
Yeah, so we have this webinar scheduled till 5. So if folks do want to stick around and ask questions, we're happy to answer them. But if we don't see any, then we'll probably end the webinar soon. And I'll just reiterate what Andrew said. Reach out to us at any point. And just as a plug, performance reporting is now online on the VAWA Impact tool. So it may look a little bit different than in the past, but the staff section is still asking you to report FTEs. And so you'll just be filling out a table, and there's nothing different there. So it's just going to be, working on those calculations and then taking that data to input on the tool. So fairly straightforward.
Like Devin's taking the Q&A last question. Somebody's asking, we did not see clients in the reporting period, but we still had full-time staff. How is this calculated? So if those full-time staff were funded by your grant award monies, then OVW is going to expect to see an FTE for those people. If they're funded to do a certain activity, that is the line item you're going to want to put them under for your FTE calculation of activities if you've got those categories. If they didn't necessarily perform those activities, even though they are still funded to do so, you're still going to want to input your FTE that these people were paid to do this activity, even if nobody needed their services at that time.
So I see that we do have a question in the Q&A pod and someone specifically asking that the FTE calculator doesn't have an option for the TA grant. And that is because the TA grant reporting form does not have a list of staff functions to report on the form. It just has a total. So what you can do is use any of the programs that are listed and type in the information for the folks at your program and get a total, and then you would just take that total and report it on your form. The programs like state coalitions, tribal coalitions, and technical assistance only have a staff total, and the way we set up the calculator, it wouldn't have worked seamlessly if those programs were put in, because the calculation and the way it's set up is different from the other programs, so they're not there. And it looks like we're still answering a question in the Q&A pod. And now we have no open questions there.
Yeah, thank you, Devin, for covering all those extra questions through the chat, through the Q&A pod.
Okay. And so if we have no other questions coming in the next minute, we will probably close. The recording is going to be posted to the VAWA MEI website, and the video of this presentation will be available. We don't know exactly when. We have to wait to get it, and then we can post it.
But it will be there. It might take time, but we can assure you it will be there eventually.
Okay, I think we can call it, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you to our interpreter, Antonio. It was very nice seeing his face as well. And I appreciate everybody's presence. Thank you.